we start this one on a personal side. We're just in the nature of the work we do talking to people in organizations. Periodically, people go through divorces. I mean, that's an upheaval for almost anybody. A lot of times there's kids involved. You're, losing half of your net worth, or you're splitting it in half. There may be some tension in actually leaving the other person.
Yeah, it's also losing the relationships.
Yeah, and so there's this focus on everything that's a problem. The money's a problem. The kids are a problem. Splitting the holidays are a problem. And you lose sight of the fact that usually by the time people are getting a divorce, one or both parties are extremely unhappy. And that there's actually an opportunity for a better quality of life on the other side. And the same thing happens in business. I mean, we're in many industries that have undergone significant change. Healthcare is probably one of the biggest. And our focus is drawn toward the problems. Our focus is drawn towards what's worrisome when it masks the opportunity to reshape the business in some way that may actually be a lot better.
Yeah, it makes me think about negotiations. I've taught negotiation. Well, we both taught negotiations. I've just taught it at a university, but you've taught it privately.
Yeah.
And, it's this idea that the reference point that you are paying attention to in your head basically blinds you to the other opportunities. And so you have to be really careful about what you're paying attention to, because if you're only looking at the downside, or your break even, or the minimum, or the thing that you fear, which I think in a divorce it's the thing that you fear, then you're missing out on all the other opportunities that could have been there, and so they never materialize.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest. It's one of the most common but least commented on downsides of uncertainty in our lives, is that we end up not remembering, oh, this could be very good for me, or there's an opportunity in here. Another example is, as different organizations have brought in AI, a lot of what you read about AI is, negative. Are people going to lose jobs?
Mm-hmm.
But I just saw a study recently that so far jobs have been gained and not lost because of AI.
Which is that's the typical way that new technology goes. It usually opens up new fields, or, new opportunities for jobs.
And I think intuitively people can get their head around, oh yeah, okay, why am I not focusing on the upside of AI? Why am I worried about, if I'm a teacher, then students are never going to know how to write, or they're going to be looking everything, whatever the case may be, when in fact there's a possibility that I could change the way I teach. We could change how we assess the students. We could change where we're using our time in the classroom. And that's lost on a lot of people as they feel
as they're focused on fear.
Yeah. And not saying that we shouldn't pay some attention to the fear and to the distortions and to the problems.
I think you need to be aware of the tripwires, right? You need to know that what the possible downsides are, and sort of have in your head the set tripwires for you to react to that. But once you have those in place, then focus on the opportunities, the good stuff that could come out of it.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's the first distortion of uncertainty. And the second one is that we're too obsessed with, because we're too obsessed with the worst case, or what's negative, we overweight it. And so it creates even more fear. I mean, basically, I say sometimes to people, nobody ever wakes up at 2 a.m. worried about the best case scenario. And so you're worried about what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? And that's the thing that I'm obsessing about. And there's a very simple drill. I don't even know where I learned it from, but it's anytime you find yourself indulging in the worst case scenario is that you make yourself generate the best case and the most likely, and then allocate the percentages to all three. And so that you can see by doing that, that I'm worried worst case. Oh my God, we're going to go bankrupt. That's what I wake up at 2:30 in the morning worried about. But what's the best case? Well, we get really rich. Well, what's the most likely? Oh, well, that there's a period of slow growth and some ups and downs, but the general trend line is up. And so if in the light of day, when I think about that, or even in the middle of the night, when you think about that and you force yourself to put the numbers, going bankrupt is a 5% chance, getting staggeringly rich is a 5% chance. And so I have 90%. I've simplified this, but the basic thought exercise is the same, is that when you put the numbers on the worst case and then the best case and then the most likely, you realize that I'm spending far too much time thinking about the worst case scenario and not enough preparing against the most likely and but being aware of the possibility of a potential best case. A lot of the antidotes to this are straightforward, like forcing yourself into most likely best case in addition to the worst case, but also generating an estimate for things. And so for the things that are worrisome, there was, we've mentioned before on the podcast, in the last few years, my dad has Alzheimer's. He's passed away now, but, there was a time when that was causing us to worry about, how long might this last? Is my mom going to burn through her money? Are we going to have to backstop any of that? And not that we shouldn't have thought about those, but that dominated too much of my time. And it was not time well spent when I could have been, instead of worrying, actually doing things. And then the third piece is that never underestimate people's ability to have terrible guesses. And even ourselves, we're humans too, so we're guilty of poor guesses, bad estimates, but we're very social. And so we take on some of that. And people telling you how bad it should be gets in your head. Like there's people who hear about my travel schedule and they assume it's terrible, but it actually mostly works for me. And I have to walk that back because they actually have a terrible, for me, their estimate of how bad it is wildly off. And it's nowhere near that bad for me. And so it is with a lot of things that we're influenced by bad estimates. The greatest thing that you could do, or any of us could do, to actually improve our ability to deal with uncertainty is to more accurately make estimates, or said differently, to gauge risk more appropriately. Not so much on the negative, still addressing the negative, but a little bit more tuned in. And the way you do that is you start tracking your predictions with a confidence interval. And if you do that long enough over time, you will actually get better. Most people actually get better, called risk calibration. So we can use, you pick almost anything. Your mom just moved to Florida from living her whole life in New Hampshire. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. Is she going to like Florida? Is she still going to go back to New Hampshire? How's her health going to be? And so we can, instead of worrying about all this, she's going to go back to New Hampshire. We're going to lose the money on the place in Florida. Her health is going to get worse, whatever. She's going to slip and have a fall in the winter in New Hampshire. We worry about all these things because of the uncertainty. We actually make a prediction. We'll do this real time. How many months out of the year do you predict that your mom will live in Florida, and how confident are you of that?
Okay.
You have a number?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got mine. What's yours?
7 months.
How confident?
I would say 60% confident.
Yeah, and I'm 8 months at 70%.
And my lack of confidence comes from the fact that I know she's going to go back to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
But even if she wants to go back to Florida, so the idea is for her to be in New Hampshire for summer. But even if she wants to go back to Florida, there's no guarantee she'll be healthy enough to do it.
Right. That she might get stuck. And so that's why your confidence level is a little bit lower. Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Mine is 8 because talking with her, that's what she said. And I think she's actually enjoying Florida. And so I put those two together to come up with a pretty high confidence of the 8 months. And so anyway, this is an example of this takes something that if you're not grounding this discussion in numbers and confidence intervals, then you just talk.
Well, yes, I think that that's where I was going. I think that the reason why the practicing helps is by doing the numbers, you start looking for the evidence, and in doing that, I think you'll get better and better at finding sources that you identify as being good sources for these things, and you get more picky about it. So, like right now, I've been working on a project. It's land development. I think I've mentioned it before on the podcast. And I don't know what I'm doing. And people are terrible guessers. And so with some of the things that we were talking about doing, the guesses have been, like in terms of how expensive things would be, have been drastically off.
Yeah.
And these were things that could have been looked up. But like basically people, their negativity was they were just pulling it out of their rear ends. And so, then when I go and I do, so that changes now who I'm relying on, right? Like now when people just volunteer their opinions, I'm like, that's nice. And then if I can look it up, I do. And then if I can't look it up, if it's something that doesn't have a solid answer, I'm being very selective about who I turn to. And I'm learning in the process who is actually giving good advice on this dimension.
Yeah. Vitally important. Yeah. And there's a ton in there, which let me just restate because you put a ton of stuff in that. Like that's the right adaptation. Is adaptation 1, people are saying things to me that are completely wrong. And we think they would know. You don't know anything about land development.
I know I don't know anything.
But you ask about, and I forget the exact example, but you ask about how long to do X, and somebody told you 8 months, and you got it done in 3 weeks. Like this is not, like from a practical standpoint, the difference between 8 months and 3 weeks is gigantic. And so good adaptation 1, people don't always know, but that doesn't prevent them from throwing out numbers. Adaptation 2, on this measure of how long something takes in land development, don't ever ask this person again. Or if you're going to ask, because sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's your significant other and they're too negative, or it's your sister, or it's the person you work with the closest to. It's your boss. And they're actually wrong. And it's not just wrong. People aren't, when uncertainty hits, they're usually wrong to the negative.
Right.
And so we're thinking it's going to be worse than it is. We're thinking that the problems are going to be greater than they are. And then that's impacting how we actually approach the issue. We have, again, some things are hard to predict, but one of the companies we work with is a car company. And they do basically a version of fixing up used cars, basically. And them and a lot of their competitors are eagerly watching autonomous vehicles because basically, I'm exaggerating, but autonomous vehicles don't wreck. And if your business is fixing wrecked cars, this is a problem.
Yes.
And they have been worried about this, thinking it was going to be game-changing for – now, this particular company we work with, they're very astute. But a lot of their competitors have been trying to get out of the fixing the wrecked cars and into the fleet management. Because yes, the cars don't wreck, but
they still need to have new paint jobs.
They turn over much faster because they're always on.
Right.
So you're
going to have wear and tear that you're not going to want it to look that way on your Waymo.
And the impact is, though, those companies were wrong. There there are almost no autonomous cars, and one day there may be, and one day we may reach a tipping point. But these conversations impacting industry decisions have been going on for 7 years. It was before COVID, the first time this company's competitors were beginning to make shifts away from the repair and into the...
Which opens up a huge opportunity for them to take over the repair part.
And that's the whole point of that is why we sat down and wrote that book right there, Uncertainty Playbook, by the way, available everywhere, is because people are not only missing opportunities, as we talked about, but they're misallocating their vital resources, time, money, and energy of their organizations, chasing worries and concerns that are bigger than they actually are. Whether that's a company chasing a wrong strategy because they're too concerned about a change that's coming, or whether that's us in our personal lives worried too much about something that's not actually going to happen.